That day was unforgettable, it all started months earlier. Let me take you back to the moment I realized something had shifted. The second he walked through the door, everything felt different. Subtle but enough to make the hairs on my neck stand on end. It wasn't just the way he looked at me, there was something unspoken in his eyes, unsure, hesitant. Time seemed to pause between us, like a word hung in the air, waiting to be said. He didn't close the door right away. Instead, he froze there, unsure whether to step all the way in. When he finally moved, his footsteps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing louder than it should, like he was measuring the distance between us. Neither of us spoke. The last time we'd seen each other, words had failed us too, but for very different reasons. That day ended with arguments, accusations, truths we weren't ready to face. When he left, it wasn't just the sound of the door closing, it felt like he took something deeper with him, the fragile sense of normal I had been clinging to. He left behind a silence heavy with everything we never said, all the things we buried. And now here he was, back as if no time had passed, but time had passed, and time changes everything. It forces you to face what you've tried to outrun, feelings you pushed down, the pain that never truly healed, only waited beneath the surface, ready to resurface. I didn't think you'd come back, I said at last, breaking the silence that had grown too heavy. He shrugged, like it was nothing, like the months between us didn't exist. I didn't think I would either, he said, but his voice was different, softer, hesitant, not like him. He had always been confident, always had the right words, but now he seemed unsure, and somehow that scared me more than anything. I studied him, waiting for more, but he just stood there, hands buried in his jacket pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, the way he always did when nervous. This wasn't a casual visit. He wasn't here to make small talk or pretend everything was fine. No easy smiles, no catching up. This was something heavier, something we had both been avoiding for far too long. You're different, he said quietly, locking eyes with me in a way that made my stomach tighten. So are you, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Inside I was a storm. Emotions I thought I'd buried long ago came rushing back the second I saw him, familiar, intense, overwhelming. I thought I had moved on, I told myself I had, but the truth was standing right in front of me, staring back. Suddenly it felt like no time had passed at all. A long silence settled between us, thick and heavy, like a third presence in the room. Neither of us looked away. Every instinct told me to break eye contact, to ease the tension, but I couldn't. Something about this moment felt too important to let go. Why now, I asked, barely above a whisper, yet it echoed across the room. He drew a slow, deliberate breath, his chest rising and falling, but his eyes never left mine. Because I couldn't keep pretending, he said, his voice raw. Not about this. His words hit harder than I expected. I had braced for anger, distance, maybe even denial, but not this, not honesty. My heart raced and I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. What could I even say? He left and I told myself I would move on. At least that's what I tried to believe. But now, face to face with him again, every wall I'd built started to crumble. You didn't have to come back, I said finally, my voice trembling despite my attempt to stay strong. But I did, he replied, steady now, like he had made peace with whatever had brought him here, and we both knew why. I swallowed hard, his words pressing down like a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. He was right. We both knew why he was here. We both knew what we'd left unsaid, and time hadn't erased any of it. I wanted to push it away, to pretend we could rewind and act like everything was normal, but normal didn't exist anymore. Not for us, I can't do this again, I whispered, stepping back, even though the space between us felt suffocating. Like the room itself was closing in. He didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to, he said gently, voice soft but clear. I'm just asking you to listen. There was something in the way he said it that made me pause. Maybe it was the honesty, maybe it was the weight behind it, the truth in his tone, or maybe I just wasn't ready to let go. I heard the vulnerability in his voice, or maybe deep down I knew he was right. I couldn't run from this forever. We were standing at the edge of something real, something we couldn't just walk away from, but this wasn't the end of the story. How could it be? Too much had been left unsaid, too much unresolved. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak, then I motioned for him to sit. He hesitated for a moment before crossing the room, settling on the couch, like he was afraid he might break something fragile, something important. I stayed standing, restless, gripping the back of the chair in front of me as if it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I didn't come here to make things harder, he said finally, voice low, almost apologetic. I couldn't keep pretending nothing ever happened. His words hung in the air, heavy with everything we'd been through. I opened my mouth to tell him I didn't need his apology, that I had moved on, but that would have been a lie, and I was tired of lying. You think I haven't thought about you every single day since you left, I said, sharper than I intended. You think it was easy for me to just move on? His eyes flickered, regret, maybe, or something deeper. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. I didn't know, he said softly, barely above a whisper. I didn't know you felt the same. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. Suddenly I didn't know what to say. How do you respond to something like that? We were here now, face to face with the truth, and as much as it hurt, we couldn't avoid it anymore, but facing it meant reopening wounds we'd both tried to forget, and I didn't know if either of us was ready for that. The silence stretched unbearably. Every second felt like forever. I could hear my heart beat loud and unrelenting. We sat there, eyes averted, suffocating under the weight of everything left unsaid. I had tried so hard to avoid this moment, and now it was here. There was no escaping it. You don't get it, I said, quieter now but still tight with emotion. You left and I had to pick up the pieces. I had to figure out how to move on, how to live with it. I know I messed up, okay, he cut in, voice rising but controlled. I know I should have stayed, but I couldn't. Not then. Why not? I asked before I could stop myself. The words came out sharper than I meant. Why couldn't you just stay? My voice rose, rougher than I intended. You left me with nothing. He stood abruptly, packing in front of the couch, hands running through his hair in frustration. The tension thickened with every step, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Because I was scared, he shouted loud enough to make me flinch. I was scared of what it meant, of how I felt. I couldn't handle it. I didn't know how to stay and face you. His words hit me like a slap. He had never admitted anything like that before. All the anger and frustration I had buried for months boiled to the surface in a heartbeat. You were scared, I repeated, voice trembling with disbelief and hurt. You think I wasn't? He stopped packing, turned, and when his eyes met mine, they were wide with shock. What? He said, like he hadn't even considered that possibility. I felt my breath catch my throat. I hadn't meant to say that. Not out loud. I didn't want him to know. He wasn't the only one who had been confused, afraid of what was growing between us. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. I was scared too, I whispered, staring at my hands, but I didn't run. I didn't leave. The silence between us thickened, heavy like fog. He stepped closer and I could Feel the warmth radiating from him. Pulling me in, my pulse quickened. I froze, unable to think, unable to breathe clearly. You should have told me, he said. Softly, but there was something else in his voice, something I couldn't place. Something darker, something that made my skin prickle. We could have figured it out together. I shook my head finally, finding my voice. No, we couldn't. It wasn't that simple. Why not? He stepped closer, now barely an inch separate us. His breath brushed my skin, sending a jolt through me that made my whole body tense. We could have tried. My heart thundered. I tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go. He was too close. The room felt too small, like it was closing in. This isn't right, I whispered, though the words felt weak even to me. Why not? He repeated, barely above a whisper, eyes locked on mine, intense and searching. No one has to know, just us, just you and me. I shook my head again, desperate to clear the haze clouding my thoughts. We can't, I whispered. The words felt hollow, powerless. Then, before I could speak again, before I could even process what was happening, he leaned in and kissed me. Shock hit me like a wave of heat. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, as if he didn't know if I'd pull away, but I didn't. I couldn't. My body moved before my mind could catch up, and I kissed him back. It was like something deep inside me snapped loose. Everything I had buried, every emotion I had pushed down, came flooding to the surface. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. The kiss deepened until there was no space left between us. My heart raced. My pulse thundered in my ears, and for that moment there was no past, no future, just now, just him, just me. But then reality crashed back in. I pulled away, gasping for breath. My mind spun with everything that had just happened. What had we done? How did it get this far? My chest tightened with fear and something else, something I couldn't name. This is wrong, I whispered, stepping back, needing space. We can't do this. He didn't move. He just stood there, eyes locked on mine, expression unreadable. Why not? He asked, voice low, almost too calm. Who says we can't? My stomach twisted. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog clouding my thoughts. This isn't right, you know. It isn't. He stepped closer again, closing the gap I had just tried to create. No one has to know, he said softly. It can just be our secret. I swallowed hard, throat tight. Thoughts raced too fast, too loud, too tangled. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to put distance between us, but I didn't move. I was frozen. His fingers brushed mine, and that same jolt of electricity shot through me again. My heart pounded. I couldn't think straight. Don't fight it, he whispered. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me in. You know this feels right. And the terrifying thing, part of me believed him. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into something deep and endless. I knew that if I took one more step, there would be no going back. The space between us disappeared, and the weight of what was about to happen pressed down on me, heavier than anything I'd ever felt. For a second I couldn't breathe, trapped between what I knew was wrong and what my body insisted was inevitable. The air felt thick, closing in on us, pushing us together. My pulse roared in my ears, my breath came in shallow gasps. The gravity of the moment crashed over me. I should have stopped him, should have stepped away, should have said what I knew needed to be said. This isn't right, but the truth, part of me didn't want to stop. Part of me had been waiting for this, maybe for months, maybe for years. And now that it was here, it felt like all the tension, all the unspoken words, every moment we danced around this was about to shatter. We stumbled backward, barely keeping our balance, moving toward the couch. My mind spun. Confusion, desire, fear colliding like a storm, but none of it mattered, not in that moment. All that mattered was him. The way he touched me, for just a Second, he made the rest of the world disappear. Time blurred as we collapsed onto the couch, our bodies tangled in heat and uncertainty. Every touch, every kiss sent sparks racing through me, lighting something I hadn't even realized was still alive. I wanted him, no, I needed him, and that terrified me more than anything, but I couldn't stop, I didn't want to. We moved together in a rhythm that felt both familiar and new, like we'd done this before in 100 different lifetimes. Yet somehow it still felt like the very first time. The world outside faded away, there was only us, this moment. Timeless and completely forbidden. It was raw, it was real, and it was happening, and in that moment I didn't care, not about the consequences, not about guilt, fear, or the questions that would come later. All I cared about was him, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world, the way he touched me like I mattered. It was wrong, but it felt so right. My mind was a whirlwind, but none of it mattered. All I could focus on was him, his touch, his breath, the way it felt like I was falling apart and being put back together at the same time. And then in one breathless, irreversible moment, it happened. The tension between us snapped, and everything we'd been holding back, every word never said, every feeling buried, rushed out in a storm of emotion, desire, and need. It was overwhelming, but I let it take me under. For a moment it felt like drowning in the best possible way. When it was over, silence settled around us. We lay tangled together, breathless, shaken. Slowly reality crept back in. Weight of what we'd just done pressed down heavy, suffocating. I couldn't move, speak, or think. My heart still pounded, my body trembled from the intensity of it all. As the adrenaline faded, the truth flooded in. Guilt, shame, fear, all waiting beneath the surface to swallow me whole. I pulled away, sitting up slowly, hands shaking. As I tried to steady myself, we need to stop, I whispered, my voice barely carried, but the words felt heavy like stone. He didn't respond immediately. He just lay there, breathing hard, staring at the ceiling. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle. I know, he said, meeting my eyes, but you can't tell me it didn't feel right. I looked away, stomach twisting. It had felt right, too right, but that didn't make it any less wrong. What had we done? How did it get this far? We can't do this again, I said, voice shaking. Standing up, I grabbed my clothes, pulling them on as quickly as I could. This was a mistake. He sat up slowly, watching me, face unreadable. Maybe, he said quietly, but we both know this wasn't just a one-time thing. I froze. His words hit something deep inside me. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that it could never happen again. But I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. And that terrified me. I stood there, staring at him, the weight of his words pressing down. My heart pounded, my thoughts spun, desperate to make sense of what had happened, but nothing did. Nothing made sense. I'm serious, I whispered, more to myself than him. This can't happen again. He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me with those intense eyes that had pulled me in from the start. There was something in his expression, something I couldn't read, something that scared me, and something that made me want to understand. It wasn't anger, it wasn't regret, it was something else. A quiet resolve, like he had already decided this wasn't the end, but the beginning. You say that, he finally said, calm but certain, but we both know it's not over. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Deep down, I knew he was right, as much as I wanted to deny it, to pretend this could be the end of whatever this was between us. I couldn't. There was something there now. Something real, something growing stronger. Admitting it, even to myself, felt impossible. We'll make it stop, I said quietly, more to convince myself than him. it has to. Stop, you don't believe that, he said. Low, steady, like he could see straight through me, like he already knew the truth I was too afraid to say, and maybe he was right. I couldn't meet his eyes anymore, couldn't face the weight of what I already knew. I turned away, hands shaking as I fumbled to get dressed. Thoughts raced, searching for anything to make this feel less overwhelming, less out of control, but nothing helped. You can't just walk away from this, he said, frustration creeping in. You can't pretend like nothing happened. I spun around, anger flaring in my chest. We can't just act like this is normal, I snapped. We can't keep doing this, he said, stepping forward. Jaw tight. Why not? I shot back, voice rising. Why can't we? No one else knows. I shook my head, stepping back, my heart pounded. Because it's wrong, I whispered, voice trembling. You know it is. For the first time I saw a flicker in his eyes, a crack in the armor he always wore, but just as quickly it was gone, replaced by that same determined look. You keep saying that, he said, quieter now but firm, but I don't think you really believe it. Frustration surged inside me, crashing against my ribs like a wave. Anger, guilt, confusion, they all swirled into something I couldn't contain. What do you want from me? I shouted, voice breaking. What do you want me to say? He stepped closer, eyes locked on mine. I want you to be honest, he said, softer now. I want the truth. I swallowed hard, throat tight, breath caught. The truth. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't know what was right or wrong. All I knew was that I was standing in front of him, and the pull between us was stronger than ever. But I couldn't give in again. I couldn't. You can't just expect me to forget everything else, I whispered. This changes everything. It already has, I added, almost to myself. It already has ruined everything. His face softened, and for the first time I saw something raw in his eyes, something unguarded. He reached out, gently brushing my arm, and my heart skipped at the touch. We don't have to let it, he said, voice low, laced with hope. We can figure this out, but we have to be honest with each other and ourselves. I stared at him, mind spinning. He made it sound so simple, like all it took was a choice, like we could just decide to make it work. But nothing about this was simple. Nothing about it was easy. He dropped his hand and stepped back. Suddenly the space between us felt like both relief and loss. I wasn't sure which hurt more. Then tell me you don't feel the same, he said, voice low, almost pleading. Tell me you don't want this as much as I do. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. The truth was, I did want it. I wanted him, but wanting something didn't make it right. I'm sorry, I whispered, voice cracking. I can't, he nodded slowly, expression clouded with quiet resignation. I guess that's your answer then. We stood in silence, the kind that stretches so long it feels endless. Neither of us knew what to say, what to do. The tension that had built for so long had finally broken, leaving only the wreckage. I didn't know how to fix it. I wasn't even sure it could be fixed. I should go, I finally said, barely louder than a breath. I need time to think. He didn't stop me, didn't say a word. He just stood there watching as I grabbed my things and made my way to the door. My heart felt heavier with every step, weighed down by everything we had just endured. It felt like leaving a part of myself behind, but I couldn't stay, not now, not when everything felt so uncertain, so fragile. What we had shared left a mark, a deep one, something neither of us could ignore or forget. It had changed something inside us, shifted the way we saw each other and ourselves. As I paused at the doorway, the weight of it all pressed on my chest. Leaving wouldn't erase what had happened. Distance might grow, but something lingered, unspoken, undeniable. I stepped outside, heart racing, feeling the gravity of what had just passed. As the door closed behind me, the silence Felt suffocating like the memory would follow me wherever I went.